Europe is shrinking. The number of people who live in many European countries has been falling in recent years, especially when compared to other nations worldwide. If you look at the biggest countries in 1960, you'd find that 7 are European. Compare that to today, when only 2 are in Europe. Obviously, this is partly due to an increase in some nations' size, but there are a lot of European nations who do actually have declining populations. Eurostat have predicted how this trend will continue from 2017 to 2050, and only Britain, Ireland, France and Norway would continue to see growth even without immigration. Without any migrants, every other European nation would see their population fall between now and 2050. This means that 25 European countries are projected to be smaller by 2050 if it weren't for immigration. When you factor in the population growth that immigrants bring with them, 15 nations are still projected to shrink. This means that even if these countries don't limit immigration levels, they would still experience a decline in population. So why is having a declining population bad for a country? The biggest reason a declining population is bad for a nation is purely economic. Every country needs workers. Without enough, there simply aren't sufficient people to cover the cost of running the country's government. This means that with fewer people, either taxes per person need to be increased, or the services offered by governments need to be reduced, neither of which are generally popular policies. This issue is compounded by the fact that Europe has an old population. Worldwide, 6% of people are over the age of 65. In Europe, you can double that, and by 2050, it's projected that 26% of Europe's population will be over 65. An ageing population is a major concern. The social security and pension schemes that exist across Europe are designed to support the older members of society. These schemes are primarily paid for by those who are working and paying the most taxes. The problem is that these two sides are falling out of balance. The ratio of the working population to those who are retired is getting worse across the continent, and many European countries are already struggling to cope. In the UK, this ratio fell from 5.5 to 1 in 1950 to 3.5 to 1 in 2015. This data is from the Global Future Report, which was published in 2017 by an employer-backed think tank. They say the only reason why this fall hasn't been even more dramatic is because of immigration. And the trend of an ageing UK isn't set to stop anytime soon. Projections show that between 2000 and 2050, the number of people who are over 65 in the UK is expected to double, and the number of people over 85 will quadruple. The Global Future Report states that Britain needs 200,000 more immigrants to move to the UK annually, which is double the current government target. This recommendation isn't even anything crazy. It's actually in line with the level of immigration that the UK experienced for much of the 2000s. The report goes on to criticise both major UK parties, saying they haven't been honest with the public about how much immigration the UK requires to operate, warning that without immigration the UK could suffer from slow growth, as has happened in countries such as Japan. The current Conservative government promised in their manifesto to do the exact opposite of the think tank's recommendation, and instead of increasing immigration targets, they want to decrease them. In the Tory manifesto, they said they'd limit immigration to tens of thousands and double the cost of employing skilled workers from abroad. This surely won't solve the problem the UK is currently facing, but what would? The things that UK and Europe need most is to decrease the average age of their population and to get more workers, which adds up to one thing: greater levels of migration. The age issue is seriously helped by migration. This is because the average age of people immigrating to the UK and Europe as a whole is generally lower than the average age of citizens in Europe. For example, 45.5% of immigrants from the Syrian refugee crisis are working age between 18 and 59. Only 2.9% of them are over 60. This is significantly lower than the average age in the UK. You might say that there's other ways that this issue could be resolved. Couldn't more money be borrowed to cover the economic gap? Well, European countries have already been doing this to make ends meet. Europe's total public debt is roughly equivalent to 90% of the entire continent's GDP. Countries are already struggling with huge amounts of debt, and that's only going to get worse as government shortfalls increase. Having more migrant workers doesn't just help cover the economic cost of an ageing population, they also fill vital gaps in the workforce. The Global Future Report discussed earlier says that an extra 47,000 people will be needed annually to cover the gap in skilled labour in the UK, and that's only in social care, nursing and construction. It's a common misconception that migrant workers in the UK are taking low-paying jobs away from UK citizens. Not only does the UK need more migrant workers, but a large percentage of them are doing professional jobs, rather than the elementary occupations such as cleaning and freight handling, which are normally associated with migrants. An analyst at HSBC, Fabio Balboni, summed it up perfectly. From an economic perspective, Europe needs more workers. It's well known that most parts of Europe have rapidly ageing populations. This results in slower growth and thus tax receipts, while simultaneously increasing government spending through pensions and healthcare. The Eurozone in particular is about to embark on this demographic change with a mountain of debt. The easiest way to support more pensioners is to have more taxpayers. This is exactly why Germany took on so many migrants from the recent migrant crisis. Germany's population is projected to fall from 81 million to 71 million by 2060. Even worse than that is the rate of pensioners to working people is set to fall, so that every one German in retirement is being supported by fewer than 2 Germans paying taxes. The economic equation is simple. Germany and many European countries need more people. The UK has the luxury of ignoring this issue in the short term, as population is expected to grow in the coming years. However, many bodies such as a think tank already discussed say the UK needs even more growth than projected. Add to that Brexit has already had an impact, decreasing the number of migrants moving to the UK. This is worrisome considering this is a time when the UK needs more people. As a whole, the EU's birth and death rates completely balanced out in 2016. The only reason the population increased at all was due to a net migration of 1.5 million people. Without increasing the population of Europe or changing people's expectations of government, Europe is going to struggle in the coming years. The UN has already criticised the lack of humanity shown in the European Commission's actions towards economic refugees. However, Europe doesn't even need compassion to begin opening its doors to migrants. It's in Europe's best economic interest to let in more migrants. Europe needs what it's most afraid of: more migrants. For more news and politics information, subscribe to TLDR News.